Hello friends. This is Subhant What Ifs. So we are back with second part on what if Naruto had lightning manipulation. Details of this part given in this description. Also be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's start the story. You called Hokage-sama. Looking up from the horrors of paperwork, Tsunade saw just the person she was waiting for to show up. Kakashi, just on time. She said with a smile. She noticed he wore his same clothes that he always had on. Blue Anbu-style pants, with a kunai pouch on his right leg. The standard green Jounin vest and his Konoha headband tilted so it was covering his left eye from view. Said man looked at her in confusion and looked at the wall where the clock was. It said it was high noon. He looked back at Tsunade and saw her grinning at him like she won the lottery. Did I miss something, Hokage-sama? He asked warily. He knew a pissed-off Sannin was not a good thing, but one with super strength that could easily send you through walls was definitely on his avoid list. And if he wasn't mistaken, he could have sworn that summoned frog he got from Jiraiya said to be in Tsunade's office at 10 not noon. No Kakashi, I just planned ahead for your little late arrival, that's all. Now sit down, we have much to discuss. Her voice was commanding and held no room for argument. Kakashi gulped, still not knowing if he was in trouble or not, and if he was he would be in a world of pain most likely later that day. Oh come on Tsunade, there's no reason to freak the poor guy out. Both Kakashi and Tsunade looked over towards the window and saw none other than Jiraiya coming through it and walking towards the far wall before leaning against it calmly. Jiraiya-sama, if you're here then Naruto is back in the village with you, right? He asked curiously, hoping his assumption was right. Jiraiya only nodded in the affirmative and gave a jerk of his head towards Tsunade. Looking over her way, he was surprised to see a very serious look on her face. Kakashi. Said man sat up straighter in his chair as the harsh voice rubbed his ears. I have a mission for you. If you accept this mission, you will go in solo, and it could possibly be fatal even for a person of your caliber, as we're not sure of the target's current strengths or weaknesses. This mission will be considered a high rank mission, but there will be no pay for it, as you have already accepted an agreement prior to this one concerning it. Do you accept knowing all these facts? Tsunade asked while never breaking eye contact with the man. After several seconds of contemplation, he answered. Who's the target and what would you like to be done to said target, Hokage-sama? Uzumaki Naruto. Kakashi's eye widened hearing the name, but Tsunade ignored it. And all you have to do is fight him until one of you surrenders or is unconscious. Kakashi's brain was working overtime trying to process all the information he was just given. Is Naruto really that strong now that you suggest he could possibly kill me? Was the first thing he asked, ignoring the question of the mission. Tsunade glared at him for another question. No more questions or answers until you accept or deny the mission, Haddock. The two of them stared at each other for a few more seconds before Kakashi shrugged his shoulders. Hi, I accept the mission, Hokage-sama. Tsunade's serious look instantly disappeared and was replaced with a small smile. Why the sudden change of heart, Kakashi? He was my student for a while, and like you said, I already made an agreement to be his sensei until he reached Chunin, or I deemed him ready to be alone as a genin. By the sounds of it, he is strong enough to be at least low Jounin level, and my guess is that having me fight him would be his test for promotion, am I correct? He asked after analyzing every angle given to him. Tsunade smiled. I always knew you had a good mind, Kakashi, yes, everything you said was correct. And to your earlier question on could Naruto possibly kill you, we don't know his skill level, so he might be able to. That's where you come in. Kakashi gave an understanding nod, but that turned into confusion a second later. What do you mean you don't know his skill level? I thought you trained him for the last 2.5 years, Jiraiya-sama. He directed his question not at the Hokage but the other Sannin in the room. Said man looked him in the eyes before replying. I was only with him for 5 months of the time. What about the other 2 years and 1 month? He was training with the Raishin clan the entire time. Was the immediate given response. Kakashi looked confused now. Who are the Raishin clan and why haven't I heard of them? They're an elite clan of Kumo, Cloud, Country, and they specialize in swords. The reason you haven't heard of them is because the clan keeps to themselves most of the time and separates themselves from the ninja of the village, even though they know many powerful jutsu to go along with their sword fighting and without. Jiraiya explained to him and Tsunade herself somewhat, seeing as she only knew the basics of the clan. I see, so you want me to evaluate his skills and see what he's capable of doing. Is there any other piece of advice I should be given before this fight, and speaking of that, when is the match? Kakashi asked curiously. Right to the point, I see. Tsunade said, getting back on task. Right, the match will be today in little less than an hour's time at Training Field 7. As for advice, ask Jiraiya, as I'm not too sure of them myself. He's the one that knows the most about his skills, and Naruto never showed his full abilities to him either. Both of them looked at Jiraiya with eager eyes. I told Tsunade everything I know about his skills in general. He started off. For one, he has a rather impressive display of jutsu I taught him, around 300, so look out for more than just cage bunshin. Speaking of that jutsu, he rarely uses it anymore. He trailed off looking out into space before focusing all his attention on Kakashi and giving him a stern look. When you two fight, treat him like any other enemy ninja out there that you encounter for the first time. He is no longer the carefree Naruto you used to know. He's a cold-hardened fighter when he wants to be, and he will kill you without a second thought if you give him the chance. Kakashi looked ready to interrupt, but Jiraiya held up his hand silencing him before he could even talk. I know what you were about to say, Kakashi. For reasons I am not willing to tell you or anyone else for that matter besides Tsunade, Naruto has changed drastically. He's not a carefree idiot anymore, but a real shinobi. He's killed before and one more won't matter to him. Do you understand this? His voice was like steel and impossible to penetrate or argue with. Hi Jiraiya-sama. He said with an equally serious voice, but he couldn't help but wonder what could have happened to cause Naruto to turn out like they were talking about. He would just have to wait and see Naruto for himself to make a judgment on his new skills and attitude. Good, because I don't want you to die for believing this was the same idiotic Naruto that you all knew. Now I'm going to leave all of his known skills out besides the amount of jutsu he knows from me, which I already told you about. I want this to be a fair fight after all. He doesn't know your own personal skills and secrets, so it's only fair. But I will give you one bit of advice. No matter what, when and if he draws his sword, be on full alert and go all out. Naruto is deadly with that sword of his. He finished seriously. Kakashi looked between the two Sannin and nodded his head in understanding. I didn't have any intention of treating him with anything but the utmost respect as a shinobi. In this career, anyone can be the death of you if you're not on guard. Good, you are dismissed, Kakashi. I expect you to be at the training grounds at exactly 1 o'clock, and no later, is that understood? She asked threateningly. Kakashi nodded his head absent-mindedly, already lost in thoughts about what Naruto could be like now and how strong he was. He waved his hand after being dismissed and shunshined out of the office with a classic poof of smoke. He had no intentions of being late for this meeting. Not a minute later the door to Tsunade's office was kicked open and banged against the wall, with the handle embedded into the plaster holding it wide open. Both Tsunade and Jiraiya tensed for a fight, but relaxed when they noticed it was only Guy and his 3 old students standing behind him looking sheepish for letting him do that. Tsunade glared at the man that was looking around the room frantically. What do you think you're doing, Guy? She yelled at the man in irritation. Said man looked up at her like he just noticed she was in the room for the first time. This only helped fuel her already building temper at having a person barge into her office unannounced. Hokage-sama, what are you doing here? He asked clueless. This is my office, you moron. She yelled while throwing a paperweight at him. Said moron was sent into the wall by the paperweight of death, as others like to call it. It only became a deadly weapon when in her hands, as that super strength was rather scary. The others in the office winced in sympathy for the downed man, but not 2 seconds later he was up and standing like nothing happened. I'm so sorry for my most unyouthful entrance, Hokage-sama, but I was looking for my eternal rival Kakashi. He seems to be running away from our scheduled fight, which is most unyouthful of him. He added as an afterthought. The others in the room winced at his use of the word unyouthful, as if it was a crime to say it. Now that's a thought, I could make it into a law, Tsunade thought with glee, but quickly shot it down when she thought of the obnoxious duo when they heard of her intentions. They would never leave her alone. Said obnoxious duo were currently screaming different tasks at each other about if they couldn't find Kakashi, they would do something that was practically impossible. The duo was none other than Mido Guy and Rock Lee, his apprentice. Enough. If that's all you wanted, then get out and leave Kakashi alone today, he won't be able to fight you. She said, irritated at their little antics. They both stopped instantly, and Guy looked at her curiously. If I may ask, why can't I fight Kakashi today? Is he hurt? He asked in a calm voice. Tsunade sighed and looked towards Jiraiya, who only shrugged his shoulders at her stare. The questioning look was easy to translate. Should I tell them? Kakashi will be fighting Naruto today to gauge his current skill level. She said after a few seconds of thought. Team Guy, as that's what they were called, consisted of Tenten, Echunin, Hyuga Niji, Inu Jounin, Rock Lee, Echunin, and Mido Guy. Another Jounin and the most powerful of them all. They were just about to comment on what she just said when they heard a cocky voice from behind them. So the dope has finally returned. Team Guy looked behind them and saw the old teammate standing not 5 feet from them. The one who spoke was none other than Inyazuka Kiba. The whole team consisted of Yuhi Kurenai, a Jounin and the strongest on the team, Inyazuka Kiba, Echunin, Hyuga Hinata, Echunin, and Aburam Shino, Echunin. And he'll be fighting one of the strongest Jounin in the village. I'd love to see his ass get kicked. Where is it taking place? He grinned at the rest of them, ignoring the glares he was getting, or maybe he was just clueless about them. Kiba, why you shouldn't he talk about Naruto-kun like that? Hinata stuttered out after hearing about her crush being back in the village. That dope, nah, he'll never beat Kakashi. He's just too strong of a fighter for him. He said without thinking about it. But you really shouldn't judge people before you know them, a lot can happen in 2.5 years. Naruto might be strong enough to win. Kurenai argued with her former student. No way, I could beat the dope no problem, and I'm no match for Kakashi. He said confidently. Kind of like how you beat him during the Chunin exams. Niji asked him rhetorically. Hiba whirled on the voice that talked. Hey. He got lucky during that fight, and besides, he beat you to remember. Niji just glanced at him. That's the entire point, you moron. Hey. I'm not a moron, you prick. He yelled back in offense. Niji didn't falter any though. Like your former sensei said, a lot can change in 2.5 years, and those Chunin exams were a long time ago. And in case you don't remember, a shinobi is supposed to learn from their past mistakes. You'd think after losing once to him after you underestimated his skills, you'd be smart enough not to judge his skills, my title giving to him when he was in the academy, and not even a ninja. Why you little Kiba stepped forward threateningly, but got only 2 steps before he was stopped by a loud commanding voice. Enough. I won't have my ninja squabbling like little children fresh out of the academy. Your ninja, so act like it. Tsunade yelled at them all. Kiba looked sheepish, but Niji just nodded his head in understanding. The others watched on to see where this conversation would go. Sitting back down at her desk, Tsunade leaned back in her chair and massaged her temple with a frown marring her face. If you want to come watch the fight, then be my guest, but you will not interfere in any way whatsoever. If you prove to be a distraction, then I'll have you removed immediately. Is that understood? She asked the currently occupants of her office. Everyone nodded in understanding. They all wanted to see how Naruto has been and how much he's changed. The fact they get to see his skills in action against one of the best if not the best jounin in the village was just a huge bonus. Good, then let's get going. I'd rather not be late to one of my own meetings I set up. She said as she got up and grabbed her jacket before heading out the door, followed quickly behind by the others in the office. The other people that showed up in her office seemed to dismiss the fact that they went to her office with an intention in mind but discarded it to see the upcoming fight. By the time they made it to the training field, they had added one more guest to their group. One Haruno Sakura, former teammate of Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke. Having finally gotten there, they noticed Kakashi was already leaning against a tree, but there was something curious about him. He was standing without his Itchy Paradise book in his hand, and he wasn't giggling perversely. When they walked into the clearing, said man looked up from the ground and waved the others over. Well, you brought quite the crew with you, but aren't we missing one other person? You did say 1 o'clock, right, Hokage-sama? He asked once they were within hearing range. Tsunade only nodded her head while looking around the clearing for any signs of the young man that should be here by now. Looking at her watch, she noticed they arrived slightly early by a few seconds and was about to tell the others to wait for Naruto when she saw something coming out of the tree lines across from them. Turning in that direction, she saw it was the person they were waiting for. The only other person to sense him was Jiraiya, but the others noticed them looking into the tree lines and followed their gazes. When Naruto walked into view, some in the group gasped, others tensed by the new look he sported. The ones that gasped were the old rookie 9 that was there. The ones that tensed were Guy, Kurenai, and Kakashi. Both Jiraiya and Tsunade were already used to the new look and the cold eyes, so they weren't affected. The others weren't as lucky as they could do nothing but stare for a few seconds before it was broken by Naruto talking. You summoned me, Hokage-sama? He asked, referring to only her and ignoring all the others around him. The others in the clearing that had gotten their wits together in time to hear scowled at him. Kiba was one of those people. What? No hello after such a long time, dope? He asked while his dog whimpered at him from behind, but he ignored what the enormous dog that reached to his stomach on height. Akamaru was saying, having his full attention on the person in front of him. The only indicator that Naruto even heard him was the slight glance he gave him from the corner of his eyes before he turned his eyes back to the Hokage who was frowning at him. This only seemed to irritate him more though. Why you? Do you think you're so good that you can ignore me now? He yelled, stepping forward threateningly. Enough. Tsunade yelled out, sensing and seeing the incoming fight that was sure to happen. She knew for a fact that Kiba would get his ass handed to him if what Jiraiya had to say was true. That and the fact that she was one of only 6, the jounin and above ranked people who saw the kunai Naruto had in his hand. The second she yelled, though, she noticed the kunai disappearing into his trench coat again. The others that saw this were slightly disturbed by the actions he would have taken if things turned into a fight, but let it slide for now. I didn't allow you to come here so you could interfere, Kiba. Have you already forgotten what I said while we were in my office? Tsunade asked him directly. Kiba only grumbled under his breath, but he stepped back, remembering that Naruto would soon get his ass kicked by Kakashi anyways, so he didn't need to do anything for now. Good, now let's get back to why we're here. Tsunade said, turning back to Naruto. Uzumaki Ration Naruto. The others looked at her like she grew a second head when she added the Ration to his name, but knew not to interrupt when she was talking. I have called you here today so your skills in combat can be tested against an opponent of my choosing, so the village of Konoha has a record of your skills and they're not being wasted on meaningless missions. This test will also be a promotion if you prove your skills are effective enough for me to beseech you with a higher rank. Do you understand your purpose here today, Uzumaki? She asked with a harsh voice and being completely serious. The others frowned at her tone of voice, knowing of the two's relationship and how they thought of each other. But looking at Naruto, they expected to see some kind of sadness or frown, but all he showed was a neutral face and a calm exterior. "Hi Hokage-sama," he answered after a glance at the others in the clearing behind her. She saw this but said nothing about it. "Good, your opponent will be Haddock Kakashi. Did you bring all your equipment needed for a fight?" Naruto turned his eyes towards the Cyclops that was still leaning against a tree staring intently at him. He looked him over with a glance and noticed he hasn't changed his outfit much from before he left the village to train. He turned his eyes back to Tsunade and nodded in the affirmative. "I'm ready for combat at all times, Hawk Tsunade-sama." He corrected himself, seeing the glare he got for saying Hokage the first time and the second. "I see, if that's the case then you have the entire field 7 at your disposal. You may start when I give the signal. The only rules are you don't kill each other and your opponent has to come out in one piece. The match will stop when I either call it, one of you is unconscious, or one of you gives up." All she got for an answer was a small nod from each of them as they turned to face each other. Seeing everything was in order, Tsunade led the others in the clearing to the tree lines and jumped into the trees. After finding one that was relatively high, with enough branches for everyone to sit or stand on, she turned her attention back onto the field. The first thing she noticed was that Kakashi was still leaning against the same tree and Naruto was still facing him, looking calmly at the other man staring him down. From what she could tell, they hadn't stopped staring the entire time. The only thing different about them was that Naruto had sealed his cloak into a scroll on his body. Shaking her head, she cleared her throat. "You can begin whenever you're ready." She yelled out loudly so they would hear her from her position in the tree lines, with the others observing right around her. For several seconds it seemed like neither of them would do anything but stare at each other, but then Kakashi sighed, bringing their attention to him. Standing his full height, Kakashi looked right at his opponent. "It's good to see you, Naruto. I see the 2.5 years of training were well spent." All he got in return was silence. Frowning for the lack of communication, he moved his left arm slightly upwards, but he had to abandon this action immediately unless he wanted to be impaled by several shuriken coming his way. Jumping to the side while still keeping his eyes focus on the perpetrator that was Naruto, he took out some of his own shuriken and threw them at his still motionless opponent. Seeing the incoming attacks, Naruto also jumped to the side, heading the same way Kakashi was heading, towards the trees. Frowning, seeing his tactic coming up, he skidded on the ground and went through 4 seals at slow Jounin speed. Putting his right hand up to his mouth after taking a deep breath, Naruto finished his jutsu. Heian. Gakakyu no Jutsu. Fire. Grand Fireball, the ball of fire that came out of his mouth, headed towards the tree lines right in front of Kakashi, effectively stopping him in his tracks unless he wanted to get burned. Jumping forward after his attack was successful, he appeared in front of the startled Kakashi with a kunai out ready to use. Bringing the kunai down, Naruto hit another kunai from Kakashi, trying to block it. Naruto didn't let this deter him though, and with a slight push of chakra in his left foot, he flipped over Kakashi, who stumbled forward from the loss of pressure and received a kunai between the eyes from the overhead Naruto. Landing on the ground, Naruto didn't even look when he heard a popping sound but kept his eyes to the front. The Kakashi that he just killed was nothing more than a log that was used in a Kawamari jutsu. Replacement. Staring at his opponent, he frowned when he realized he didn't accomplish stopping Kakashi. "I see it won't be that easy, Kakashi." Naruto spoke up slowly. "Indeed," said man responded. He was standing 10 feet from Naruto with his left hand over his headband ready to raise it. "You've definitely improved, Naruto, I'll need this to keep up." With that statement, he raised his headband, showing his Sharingan eye. The eye was blood red with 3 black tomes. "Shall we?" He gestured for Naruto to come with his hand. Naruto watched him slightly more cautiously now that he had the Sharingan out, but he didn't let it deter him. If anything, it only made the fight more interesting. Making 3 seals at a civilian speed, Naruto leaned slightly to the side and then back to the other side. Kakashi frowned seeing this as his Sharingan picked up the jutsu like child's play, but let Naruto do whatever he was going to do. "You know, with the Sharingan I can see through any genjutsu, right, Naruto?" Kakashi asked his former student. Naruto didn't seem concerned at all though, and only continued to sway on his feet for 10 seconds before he stumbled to the right. That's when the jutsu took effect and his body seemed to travel to the side at high speed, even for a Jounin level ninja, leaving after images of his body in its wake, and then it just disappeared from view 15 feet from where it started. Kakashi watched all of this with caution. He knew exactly where Naruto was, but to use that jutsu was another thing entirely. It was a low to mid-range chunin genjutsu, nothing that a jounin would fall for, especially him, seeing as his Sharingan could see through all genjutsu. What are you playing at Naruto? He thought. Unknown to him, the others in the tree line were also thinking along that same thought. Every single one of them could see through the genjutsu. Kiba smirked seeing this. Well, the dope has at least some skill with genjutsu now, it's better than before he left anyways, but that's just pathetic. The others glanced at him, but Kurenai narrowed her eyes. No, that genjutsu was just a distraction, the real one is about to start, I can feel him forming one, though it's very discreet, almost high jounin level genjutsu. She said absent-mindedly. The others looked at her like she grew an extra head, but knew not to argue with her when it came to genjutsu seeing as she was the best in the village in that field. Besides, Jiraiya started. With his control of his chakra now being at elite jounin level, a genjutsu of the level Kurenai is talking about wouldn't be too hard for him. His control's that good now? Tsunade asked. Hi, the things I've seen him do would need that sort of control, so I know it's that good. He stated confidently. The others reluctantly agreed and continued to watch the fight when they noticed Naruto disappear. Kakashi saw this, and his eyes widened slightly before he pushed some chakra into his Sharingan eye to cancel the effects. It only took half a second, but that was more than enough for Naruto to get into position. With a flick of his wrist he sent a kunai sailing towards the confused man and charged in right behind it. Just as the genjutsu cancelled, Kakashi had to quickly bring a kunai out to block the incoming one, only to see a blur appear behind him, which happened to be Naruto. Taking advantage of his opponent's back, Naruto kicked out with his foot right into Kakashi's back, sending him sailing through the air. Not stopping there, he formed a couple of fast seals in a split second. Gyuden. Renkuden. Drilling air bullet, the compressed air sped at the still airborne man who flipped to see the incoming attack and let out a volley of shuriken to intercept the attack. The two collided and the airball exploded sending the shuriken in every direction. Landing on the ground, Kakashi immediately sprung forward with a kunai in his right hand. Naruto did the same thing seeing his attack stop so easily. They both charged at moderate speed and met in the middle of the clearing with kunai drawn and ready. Clashing was heard throughout the clearing as swipe after swipe they exchanged blows with each other, doing a deadly dance of Mortal Kombat with each other. That is until Kakashi positioned his kunai just right and managed to make Naruto drop his otherwise lose a finger or worse. Taking advantage of his weaponless opponent he swung at him only for his arm to be blocked at the wrist with Naruto's forearm and his arm violently grabbed and twisted, causing him to flip with a twist or get a broken arm. This also had the unfortunate consequence of making him drop his weapon, but that still left him with plenty. Landing in a crouch, he blocked the kick coming at his gut and pushed it to the side while bringing a fist to Naruto's face. Letting the fist glance his face by tilting his head sideways, he leaned forward and elbowed Kakashi in the shoulder and following his twisting body, tried to backhand him with his other hand only for the man to jump back from him and continue for 3 more jumps until there was a good 20-foot space between them. Both stood up and slid into their respective taijutsu, hand-to-hand, stances. Kakashi's was standing with his knees bent and slightly to the side facing Naruto with his back completely straight standing to his full height. One hand was open while the other was half clenched. It was a mix between the iron fist and the interceptor fist. Naruto also slid into a stance of his own. He was crouching with his legs bent and his upper body leaning slightly forward while his entire body was sideways to Kakashi's. He had his left leg completely in front of him with it being slightly bent. His right leg was almost at a 90-degree angle to the ground. His left arm was stretched out straight with an open palm and his right arm was facing towards the back of his body, also straight with a slight bend as was his other arm, with his palm being open. Naruto sliding into this stance caused all of the Jounin and one Hokage eyes to widen dramatically. Kakashi faltered in his own stance seeing the very familiar one in front of him that he hasn't seen in over 16 years. How do you know that style, he stuttered out questionably. The other Jounin and Hokage wanted to know this also. Jiraiya wasn't affected at all by it though, Tsunade noticed with narrowed eyes. Naruto also narrowed his eyes. And how do you recognize this style, Kakashi? As far as I know, no one in Konoha has ever been taught by a Raishin clansman, and it's strictly forbidden to teach this style to anyone but a clansman no matter what. Kakashi's eyes widened even more from that little bit of information. You mean you learned that style from the Raishin clan, and does that mean you're part of their clan now? Naruto let a small bit of killer intent rise from his body threateningly. You didn't answer my question, Haddock. Where do you know this style from? He snarled out, getting angry that an outsider knew their clan style. I don't know the style personally, only one person in Konoha could ever learn that style, and he created most of it himself after learning from a scroll the basic stances. He answered, seeing his growing anger at the obviously clan-only style. Haddock. My sensei, the Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato. He answered. Naruto let his killer intent subside and stood from his stance and turned to the direction of the people watching. While Kakashi and Naruto were talking, Tsunade slid up to Jiraiya and pulled him up by his collar and glared at him. He remained completely calm and looked her in the eyes. "You taught him that style," she yelled the words that threateningly, while keeping her voice a whisper, so not even the famous Inuzuka ears could hear them. Jiraiya just tilted his head to the others, and Tsunade followed his gaze and listened to them talk about it being a Raishin clan Taijutsu style only. She snapped her head in Jiraiya direction again and let him drop after a second thought. "You know I won't teach him any of that until both of us say he's ready, but he already had 80% of the style down, I just helped him perfect it to 100%. He told her calmly. She was about to respond when she was interrupted by the person they were talking about yelling up to them. "Tsunade-sama." He yelled angrily. Said woman looked at him and saw he was actually pissed at something and didn't have that deadly calm about him anymore. "Does this scroll the Yondaime had still exist?" He questioned with a glare. She sent one back at him. "That is confidential information, Naruto, I can't tell you." The glare he sent her was bone-chilling. It didn't help that he released an enormous amount of killer intent that equaled what a cage could put out. Tsunade idly noticed the others around her freeze up and shiver a second. The hummingbird Taijutsu style is a Raishin clan's secret and it will be kept that way as long as I'm alive. If there's a scroll out there telling how to do it, I want it. I don't care whose it is, they won't have our secrets or I will personally kill them. Now is the scroll still in existence? He asked her with a deadly glare. She met his glare full force, and if she was honest with herself she was slightly put out by it, but she didn't let any of that show on the outside. "For your information it does exist, but no one can get to it." Naruto only narrowed his eyes. "And how do you know this?" "All of the Yondaime's personal jutsu and things are at his clan house, and there are extensive seals around the place. No one but blood could ever get in, not even Jiraiya with his extensive knowledge of seals can get in." She informed him calmly, pushing aside the killer intent, knowing that the information just given would subdue his anger. It took a few seconds of staring at her, but he nodded in understanding and let his killer intent drop to nothing again. "I'm sorry for losing my temper, Hokage-sama, but these are clan secrets, I won't let them fall into the wrong hands, especially now." He apologized sincerely while bowing to her. "I understand, Naruto, just don't let it happen again," she said calmly. "Hi Tsunade-sama." He replied immediately. The others around Tsunade let a breath out when the killer intent subsided and relaxed again. "Unreal, I've never felt that much killer intent before." Kiba spoke up with wide eyes. The others could only nod, but Jiraiya spooked them by appearing beside them. "That's because his killer intent is a cage level, the most you've ever felt is high jounin," he stated matter-of-factly. The others just gaped at him stupidly. "The baka, how can he produce such a high killer intent?" he asked angrily. Jiraiya only shook his head sadly at the obvious jealous boy. "You don't want to have killer intent as high as he has, the cost is too much." Kiba looked at him angrily and was about to retort so when Neji interrupted him calmly. "The only other way to raise one's killer intent without training to be at that level physically also is by having something dramatic happen to you and your body pushes itself past its limits and at that time you have to feel pure hate or anger at something or someone." Kiba lost all his anger and looked back at Naruto that was in the clearing that was still facing them. His body and face was back to being neutral and calm like it was before. It's rather surprising how fast he could bring that level of killer intent out really. "You can continue the fight now, Naruto, Kakashi," Tsunade stated, seeing Naruto waiting for her orders on his previous actions. Turning around he walked back to where he was before and was about to slid into his stance again when he was stopped by Kakashi asking him a question. "Wait, Naruto." Seeing as he got his attention, Kakashi continued. "About my question earlier." He let the question hang in the air, seeing Naruto's neutral face take on a colder edge. Taking a deep breath, Naruto answered. "Hi, Kakashi, I'm part of the clan. Anything else you want to know before we continue our fight?" he asked guardedly. Frowning, he thought for a few seconds before nodding. "Did you enjoy your time there?" "Hi, it was the happiest I've ever been in my life there. I had my own family and we took care of each other, it was good while it lasted." He trailed off quietly, showing a little sadness at the end. Frowning, he asked the next question he had. "Why do you speak of them like they're gone, Naruto?" Naruto lowered his head when he asked the question, but when he raised his head, Kakashi actually took a step back at the cold glaciers his eyes had turned into. Those were the eyes of a man on a mission to kill by any means necessary, and he would do whatever it took. "They're all dead," he stated coldly, his voice alone sent a shiver down everyone's spines in the area. Up in the trees everyone that was watching had different reactions. Some sobered up and stopped judging Naruto right there. Some narrowed their eyes, and others gasped in shock and sadness. "I see there's only one more question I have, Naruto, what happened to your wife?" Kakashi questioned quietly. Everyone in the trees watching that didn't already know gasped in shock that Naruto was married at some point in time. Naruto clenched his fists into balls, they were so tight in fact that his knuckles had turned white and a second later blood started to drip from his closed fists. "Dead, she was murdered," Naruto said in a hollow voice. Everyone in the clearing had a violent reaction to this, especially the ones who knew of his past in the village and how unhappy he was when a child. To have nothing from the very beginning and then finally gain everything you had ever dreamed of in your life and have it ripped from your grasp was just terrible. But everyone was brought out of their depressing thoughts when Naruto spoke in that same hollow voice as before. It was only a whisper, but it traveled to everyone in the area. His hands had loosened, showing unmarked skin, uncanny for a person that has blood from wounds on them that were now gone not even a minute later after they were inflicted. "When I run into the ones responsible for taking away my family, I'll destroy them all. I'll leave nothing but dead behind." His voice went from hollow to a deadly quality in a split second to a cold attached at the end. "Everyone that knew of the attack in Iwa, Sound, and anyone else will die by my blade, which is a promise of a lifetime," he swore with cold conviction. The ones that knew him in the clearing knew of the full implications of what he just said. Uzumaki Ration Naruto never broke his promises, he'd go through hell and back to accomplish them. To know he had a grudge this huge against those two countries was something huge and could possibly be disastrous. "Enough questions, Haddock," Naruto stated calmly, but he was different now, his voice was a monotone and his entire being radiated seriousness. "Let's continue our fight, but this time we don't hold anything back." With that, Naruto took out the same scroll he had out earlier before the fight started. Kakashi tensed, getting ready for anything, but he didn't have to. After Naruto bit his finger, drawing blood, he swiped it on the scroll, and with a puff of smoke, the trench cloak from earlier was back in his possession. Putting the scroll away, Naruto put his clan cloak on with reverence. It was the same pitch black one with red lightning traveling all around it. The cloak reached just past his knees and covered his entire back. The sleeves were cut so they stopped halfway down the bicep and the front was left completely open. It could be closed if wanted, but Naruto left it open for some reason. Looking the person in front of him over, Kakashi couldn't help but picture the Yondaime superimposed over Naruto. They looked so similar but yet completely different. He wasn't the only one that thought so either. All the Jounin and two Sannin could see the similarities, it was almost scary how much they looked alike. It was only when Naruto put his hands in the ram seal did Kakashi come back to the present and do the same. Both narrowed their eyes in exertion, and the clearing was filled with a heavy feeling of pressure. Both of their chakras spiked and steadily grew. Kakashi's topped out at Elite Jounin, but Naruto's kept growing beyond it. The others could only watch in shock as it kept rising well past Kakashi's level and into the Sannin level. But they got an even bigger shock when it rose past that and started to affect the actual environment around him. The rock started rising in the air and being crushed under the pressure, and the ground under his feet cracked until finally his chakra spiked to its max at low-level cage chakra. Looking up, Naruto could see the shocked looks on most of their faces, but didn't let it bother him. He had a fight to finish. Locking eyes with his opponent, he slid into his hummingbird Taijutsu style, while Kakashi slid into his combo style. The others in the clearing knew this is where the real fight started. With no warning whatsoever, Naruto charged forward at low Jounin speed. Kakashi prepared himself for the attack and was not surprised when Naruto sped up at the last second to strike him hard. After all, he was Minato's student and he saw him use the same style. It was almost like fighting his sensei, but he knew they were two different people with different skills. Naruto saw him tense for the speed burst at the end, but he figured it would be like this, his style was used by this man's sensei after all. With a burst of speed, he covered the last 5 feet with lightning fast speed and thrust his right arm forward at high Jounin speed. Kakashi ducked the initial strike while jumping backwards and sending his left foot for a sweep kick that was easily jumped over. Landing quickly, Naruto covered the short distance and led a volley of strikes at his opponent that were all either dodged or blocked. Frowning at the lack of hits connecting, Naruto changed tactics. Letting Kakashi catch one of his kicks, he positioned his body so he would have no choice but to flip him backwards, and that is exactly what he did. Going with the flow, Naruto landed on his hands and twisted his body around. Kakashi wouldn't say it out loud, but Naruto was doing amazingly good. He was keeping him on the defensive and giving him no room for offensive attacks, but he got his opening when he flipped him backwards. That thought went out the window when Naruto spun on his hands and fell purposely forward on his back, bringing an axe kick right into his shoulder blade, making him buckle under the impact. Naruto saw his attack was successful and continued with the attack. Twisting his body again, he hit Kakashi in the face with his other leg, sending the man tumbling on the ground before he flipped onto his feet. By that time, Naruto was already on his feet though and charging head-on at him. The others watching could only watch on in fascination and admiration of their skills. Kiba had his mouth open in shock at the clear level of power and skill Naruto was displaying against the most powerful and skilled Jounin in the village. He was easily holding his own, and he grudgingly admitted that he was the better fighter of the two. Kakashi blocked the first strike at his face, and the next 10, and his Sharingan finally caught an opening that he took immediate action against. Throwing a punch he knew Naruto could easily dodge, he waited for the side step that would come. Just as he predicted, he sidestepped and he immediately threw his elbow out, striking Naruto in the shoulder and turned the fight to his advantage. Having enough of being on the defensive after getting hit 10 times in various places, Naruto jumped back while throwing a kunai at Kakashi. Seeing the kunai and the present attached, Kakashi leapt back, avoiding the explosion that came when it hit the ground and caused smoke to rise into the air, covering their view of each other. Oten. Doryuden. Earth Dragon Bullet. Kakashi heard the attack through the smoke. Acting quickly, knowing what the attack did, he made his own jutsu. Oten. Doryuheki. Earth Wall. Stomping the ground, a wall of earth shot up in front of him, blocking the incoming chunks of earth. The second the last thump of earth colliding was heard, Naruto came from above the wall and dropped on top of him. With gravity helping him, Naruto was able to block the swipe made with a kunai and twist his body to send a chop to the neck, making him choke and stumble backwards. The second he landed, though, the Kakashi he hit crumbled into dirt and two hands grabbed his ankles and pulled him underground. Oten. Shinju's Anshu no Jutsu. Inner Decapitation. Standing above ground now, Kakashi was quick to react when a kunai came sailing at him from above and blew up a part of the wall he made just a second ago, making it crumble on top of him. Jumping to the side, he was just able to get out of the way when he saw a ball of compressed water coming at him from the side. He ideally noticed a pop sound coming from the place he pulled Naruto underground up to his head. Page Bunshin, Shadow Clone, he thought. There goes Jiraiya's theory of him not using it anymore, but he did say he just doesn't use it a lot now. Damn. Going through seals at his fastest pace, he sent a stream of fire in the direction the water ball came from. Kaiten. Karyudan. Fire Dragon Missile. The two attacks collided, but most of his attack flew around the ball of water and towards the Naruto that he could now see, dodging his attack by rolling away. With his roll, he grabbed some shuriken and let them fly at Kakashi while forming seals afterwards. Shuriken Shadow Clone no Jutsu. The 5 shuriken multiplied into 50, heading towards the only other man in the clearing. Said man saw this coming from a mile away and decided to get more serious with the jutsu fight. Oten. Doryuheki. Earth Wall. The wall shot up again like last time, but he didn't stop here. Oten. Dorama. Earth shot, hitting the wall with his fists. He pushed chakra into his fist each time it connected with the wall, sending out chunks of earth about a foot big each time. He continued this 20 times before stopping, having Naruto on the defensive, dodging attacks left and right with deflected shuriken in there also. Kaiten. Gakakyu no Jutsu. Grand Fireball. Naruto saw the incoming fire jutsu coming at him, but being in mid-air, he knew it would be tricky to dodge, especially with all the earth attacks still falling around him. Pushing off a nearby falling earth chuck, Naruto jumping to the side and tried to get out of the way, only for his cloak to catch on fire as he dodged. Rolling on the ground, he applied chakra to the cloak to smother the flames. It almost worked, but the distraction cost him. Suiton. Kokosujin. Concentrated Water Spike. Sensing the incoming attack, he jumped straight into the air to avoid it. He saw out of the bottom of his eyelids that it was a spike of water that he just barely dodged in time. Sadly, that wasn't enough for him. Kakashi saw his chance when he went straight up into the air. Jumping high in the air by leaping off of 2 trees, he positioned himself above Naruto. Suiton. Hakamyu. Rapid Crasher. Even if he wanted to dodge, he couldn't, and he didn't have the time to use replacement, so Naruto did the only thing left for him. He threw his arms in front of his face and upper chest and reinforced them with chakra. It wasn't a second too late either, as the rapid torrent of water that came at him washed right over him and slammed him into the ground hard. Landing a couple yards away, Kakashi waited for the dust to clear to see the damage done. Kakashi didn't have to wait long for the dust to clear, as Naruto was just flipping up from the impact and landing on his feet from his down position on the ground. Dusting himself off, Naruto inspected the damage. Besides his sour ribs, he knew he was perfectly fine, but that's not what he was looking at. No, he was looking at the damage done to his cloak. He noticed right away that half of the bottom was burnt off and there were multiple holes in the fabric. That won't do, he mumbled to himself, but with his Sharingan eye activated, Kakashi read his lips and knew what he said. He was rather astonished when he sensed chakra being pushed into the cloak and it seemingly repairing itself. He wondered how he was doing it when he noticed a slight glow from the inside of the cloak and saw just a glimpse of a seal, or maybe that was multiple seals, seeing how fast it was repairing. Then 2 seconds flat, the article of clothing was back to new. Naruto nodded to himself and lifted his gaze to Kakashi's. Well, you're sure fast on the draw when it comes to jutsu, aren't you, Kakashi? Naruto asked rhetorically. Said man was about to make a comment but was interrupted when Naruto kept going. Looks like I'll have to go all out now, prepare yourself. Naruto's voice went from monotone to downright deadly dangerous after the slight pause and then the warning. Making 2 different seals, Naruto held his hands in the ram seal for a good 4 seconds while his body seemed to dry itself of all the water. Kaiten. Atsusa. Heat. Naruto's body steamed for a few seconds until his body was completely dry again. I'll admit that you've gotten better Naruto, definitely low jounin in skills, maybe mid jounin, but you're no match for me, let alone strong enough to keep that promise you made earlier. Kakashi stated matter-of-factly, but cringed at the end, realizing his choice of wording was very bad. Do you dare say that anything, but that I refuse to let them get away with what they did Haddock. Naruto whispered venomously, but his words echoed out to everyone around to hear. Shaking from head to toe, Naruto slowly lifted his head from the ground, showing a calm face that betrayed every emotion of anger and hate he felt on the inside. You do not question my ability to avenge my family Haddock. His voice was venomous, and with every word he spoke his chakra would rise slightly higher until it peaked out at low-level Sannin. Ever? Naruto calmly replied out as he let his chakra explode out from his body, but this wasn't just chakra, but nature chakra. To be more specific, it was his lightning nature chakra. The others couldn't believe what they were seeing in front of them. The second Naruto's chakra reached its peak, everyone in the clearing felt a foreboding feeling. Kakashi felt it the most, and he immediately jumped backwards. It was a good thing that he did too, as the second he leapt from the ground lightning crackled around Naruto's arms and spread over his body until it encompassed him in a field of electricity. When he let his chakra explode, the lightning that was mixed in went with it and spread around him for a good 10 feet. Everyone, even the elite Jounin, Hokage, and Sannin, couldn't believe what they were seeing. Such a high control of one's element was unheard of. The ground where the lightning was touching was leaving scorch marks and slight cracks and indents everywhere it touched. When it finally resided, Naruto was left completely unharmed. They could still see small sparks shooting around his fingertips every now and then, but to have such control was phenomenal. After watching the display of elemental manipulation, Kakashi gulped loudly and absent-mindedly wondered what he had gotten himself into. Staring the man down, Naruto couldn't help but glare for what this man said. Ilpei kept repeating over and over in his head before his mantra just stopped abruptly, and the entire area around them for a good half-mile was perfectly silent. "Fight Haddock," Naruto calmly voiced before he shot forward at mid-jounin level speed and reached him within seconds. Kakashi tensed, getting ready for the volley of attacks to come, and quickly re-slid into his respective stance, seeing Naruto in his hummingbird style. The second he was within 10 feet, Naruto sped up to a speed even he wasn't expecting, and thus caught him off guard. Hovering the last few feet at low Sannin level speed, Naruto got right up to Kakashi's guard and slapped his hands away from his hastily put up defense to nail a hard right fist to the gut, sending the man skidding back. He didn't end it there though, and kept attacking with even more ferocity. Charging forward, Naruto thrust his left hand forward, only to get it caught and catch a left fist of his own. Both stood struggling for domination over the other in pure strength, and with a slight step back and push forward, Naruto came out on top while Kakashi stumbled back. Going with a backwards movement, Kakashi used it to jump back and create some distance while doing some seals. Heian. Hasenka no Jutsu. Phoenix fireballs, effectively shooting out multiple fireballs about the diameter of 2 feet in Naruto's direction. Not stopping his charge any, Naruto weaved in and out of the deadly fireballs with grace and accuracy, leaving them to pass by at least a foot each time, while doing his own seals. Kakashi saw this with his Sharingan eye, but couldn't tell what jutsu he was using, as his cloak was blocking his view of the hand seals. Getting in range of Kakashi, Naruto brought his hands out of his cloak and thrust them forward only for Kakashi's eyes to widen and for him to use replacement at the last second. Seeing that Naruto's hands were covered in chakra of lightning manipulation, his eyes widened and he used a quick replacement and just in time. As the second that Naruto's hand touched a log, the thing was covered in electricity and was blasted apart by the high intensity of lightning traveling through it. Gyuden. Renkuden. Drilling air bullet, Kakashi let out a ball of compressed air to fly at Naruto's back, only for him to twist around in a split second with his hands yet again hidden by his cloak. Thrusting his hand forward, Naruto let out what looked like a ball of electricity. Raikyu. Lightning ball. The ball collided with the compressed air and seemed to struggle with it before both of them blew up, sending out high winds with static electricity mixed in around the environment. The ones watching were shocked to see a lightning attack come to a standstill with a wind attack, as wind was more powerful than lightning in the elemental circle. The wind attack should have easily taken out the lightning one. It just showed how strong these lightning attacks Naruto was using really were. A few seconds later the wind settled down, showing both opponents unharmed on the opposite side of the field from each other. Both had sweat on their bodies and looked ready to go at it again any second. They were both covered in debris and dirt, and both had what would later be bruises and cuts. Looking at each other, they both knew that this fight had turned into a standstill, as every attack they threw at each other, they would just block or counter. It was time to bring out the big guns. And that is exactly what Naruto did. Raising his right arm, Naruto grabbed the handle of his sword that until now had been untouched. Grabbing the hilt, he waited for Kakashi to make a move. Kakashi tensed at this. He could clearly remember the words of warning from Jiraiya, saying that Naruto was absolutely deadly with that thing. Reaching into his kunai pouch, he fingered a scroll before grabbing a handful of shuriken and 2 kunai. Throwing the shuriken as fast as he could, Kakashi wasn't surprised when they were deflected out of the air like mere playthings from the sword Naruto now held in his hands. The sword was a piece of art if Tenten and Hade had ever seen one. The thing was flawless in style and design, and if they were to guess it would be perfectly balanced. It was a katana that was just slightly longer than a normal one, with a shining silver blade with a tint of blue mixed into the edge. Kakashi may not have been surprised that they were deflected, but he was surprised when the shuriken came hurtling back at him even faster, then he threw them. Quickly dodging 2 of them and deflecting the other 3 into the tree lines, while he threw up both of his kunai in a blocking move when Naruto appeared in front of him with a vertical slash aimed to kill. Seeing his initial strike block, Naruto pulled back and swung wide at his midsection, only for that to be blocked and pushed to the side. Going with the push, Naruto twisted his body around as fast as he could and sent another midsection strike, but this time from the other side. Kakashi wasn't expecting the next strike to be so fast after the first one and hastily pushed up a defense, only for him to be rocketed sideways by the sheer power and strength put into the strike. Tumbling 3 times before he managed to right himself, he quickly jumped to the side to avoid the incoming bullets of rock coming at him from Naruto, dragging his sword through the ground and launching them at him with a vertical upward swing. Seeing his rock barrage dodge, Naruto sprinted forward with a thrust that was dodged and had to block a stab with the lower part of his blade. Letting the kunai slide over his blade until it reached the middle, he pushed back, throwing one of Kakashi's arms up while he brought the other down to prepare for his next strike of the sword. Not disappointing him, Naruto jumped forward, pushing his entire body weight into his sword. Kakashi managed to block it but buckled under the pressure he was under. Pushing chakra into his arm muscles, he gave an almightily push and threw Naruto straight up. Naruto took this in stride and twisted his body into a ball while extending his sword down to Kakashi's shoulders, effectively slicing his Jounin jacket neck guard in half and leaving a small cut in his skin. Wincing in pain at the sharp blade, he looked up only to see Naruto land on the underpart of a tree branch with his legs bent. Pushing off the tree with as much force as he could muster, Naruto rocketed down to the ground with his blade ready, only for Kakashi to leap away and leave him to crash into the ground, causing it to shake violently from the impact. Kakashi could only gap at the power and skill Naruto had with a sword. He wasn't the only one though. Both Tenten and Hei thought of themselves as great swordsmen, but they were realizing that their skills with the blade were very inadequate when compared with Naruto's. When the dust cleared from the impact zone, the people watching stared open-mouthed at the crater caused and the fissure in the ground. The crater was 5 feet wide and a foot deep, with Naruto calmly standing in the middle of it. His sword was facing the ground with the point centimeters from where the fissure started. The fissure itself was a hair big where it started at Naruto's blade, but expanded 10 feet out and grew to be a foot wide and about 6 feet deep. Tightening his grip on the hilt of his sword, Naruto brought the sword horizontal to his body, with his arm outstretched like he was handing the sword to someone. When he lifted his left arm, the others could see small sparks of electricity forming in his hand. He slowly extended 2 of his digits out, the pointer and middle finger, and placed them on the metal closest to the hilt. Slowly running his fingers across the blade, Naruto watched as the blade took on a slight blue hue to it and vibrated comfortably in his hand, as if the blade itself missed the contact of the electricity now flowing through it. Bringing his hand down, Naruto looked Kakashi over to see him watching the blade with caution, while backing away slightly before his back was to a tree. Turning the sword so its point was facing Kakashi, he slid into the hummingbird stance, but this time it was reversed with his right arm in the back and the left arm forward. His left hand had the tip of the sword resting on his thumb, ready to be used at any moment, with the bladed side pointed towards the sky. With no warning whatsoever, Naruto blasted forward. There was no other way to describe it, as 1 second Naruto was crouching in his clan style, and the next there was a dust cloud behind him. Throughout the clearing, everyone heard a loud cling and an enormously loud groaning of a tree before they saw Kakashi roll away from the tree that he had been standing in front of, and then saw half of a tree fall behind him and the other half fall the other way. The only ones that could actually follow Naruto's movements when he shot forward were Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Kakashi because of his Sharingan eye. The others were shocked to see that it was actually Naruto that caused the tree to be split from the point of his sword impacting and going though the tree to split all the way to the top. They didn't get to admire it for long though, seeing as Naruto made some one-handed seals under his cloak. Turning in Kakashi's direction, he stepped forward and seemed to blur to where Kakashi was standing, leaving after images in his wake from his sword's glow of electricity, showing him raising it above him and bringing it down. Kakashi was working overtime trying to keep up with Naruto's speed and technique with his sword. The weird thing was that the lightning was interfering with his Sharingan eye ability to predict his opponent's movements. It was still working, but it was sending off electricity that was leaving a trail itself, making it hard to distinguish between where it would be and where it was at the moment in time. But luckily for him he was able to keep up with him, otherwise he would have been dead by now and that shunshin, high-speed movement, would have gotten him. But luckily he was able to block in time but had to immediately lower one of his kunai to his chest to block the next swing. Blocking his 12th sword slash, Kakashi jumped backward. When he sailed backwards he noticed Naruto wasn't following him but counted himself lucky. That is until he landed and brought up his kunai in a defense position and noticed something that is almost impossible happen. Both of his kunai were cracked in several places and missing chunks of metal on the edges. He gaped at them in shock because kunai were made to be the hardest metal possible. To crack them wasn't unheard of, but to do it from sword slashes was unreal. Focusing past his kunai to the person responsible, he saw him standing calmly waiting for him to make a move. Shaking his head, he dropped the now useless kunai and slipped his hand into his kunai pouch, taking a scroll out and swiping some blood on the thing while it unrolled. In a puff of smoke a Kodachi appeared, his old Anbu short sword to be more precise. Taking a hold of the weapon before it fell to the ground he got into a defensive position. Seeing his opponent with a proper weapon again Naruto shot forward, but this time at high jounin level speed. Blow after blow was exchanged while the rest in the tree lines watched on in fascination at the deadly battle. The old genin could only watch on in shock at Naruto's display of power and a little bit of intimidation at his ruthless fighting style. They didn't know it, but the jounin were thinking along the same lines as them. Jiraiya and Tsunade were watching the exchange of blows with interest and calculating eyes. They both had no idea that Naruto had improved this much over the 2.5 years, and to say they were proud would be an understatement. The only bad thing was his way of thinking when it came to his now dead family. It reminded them a lot of Sasuke wanting to kill Itachi way too much for their liking. Twisting his sword after a parry, Naruto brought his blade under that of Kakashi's shorter one and thrust forward. Him using a short sword was one of the smartest things he could do, as it allowed him to maneuver the blade quicker so he could block Naruto's lightning-fast attacks. That all stopped though when Naruto got under his guard and thrust forward. He had no option but to go backwards, and that left his sword arm to be completely open to attack. Instead of losing his arm, he let the weapon drop to the ground, only for it to be hit with Naruto's sword as it was dropping and go twirling in the air, embedding itself up to the hilt in a tree. Jumping back without a weapon he knew he was almost out of options to turn this thing around. He could see sweat on Naruto's forehead and he was panting slightly, but he himself was in far worse condition. Ever since Naruto drew that sword of his, he's been on the defensive 90% of the time. When Jiraiya said he was deadly with a weapon and there was no one better he's seen, he wasn't lying. He had his doubts as mastering the sword is rather hard, but Naruto more than proved he was capable of using one with deadly efficiency and accuracy. Finally coming to his only option he could think about to turn this fight in his favor, he pulled out the rest of his shuriken that he noticed were only 8 of them. Letting them fly at his opponent he jumped high into the air while going backwards also. Naruto saw all of this with ease, and with the same ease as before sent the shuriken back at Kakashi, only for said man to let out a ball of fire at him. Pain. Bikakyu no Jutsu. Grand Fireball. Naruto instantly knew something was different when he noticed the fireball was much smaller than normal. The fireball hit the shuriken and redirected them enough for them to be harmless to anyone, while the ball of fire itself continued towards Naruto. Seeing the incoming ball of fire he twirled his sword in his hand until it was nothing more than a blur in front of him. When the fire impacted it just swooshed around him harmlessly and went out. Now that the fire was out Naruto could see and hear the purpose of the ball of fire. It was nothing more than a distraction to block his view and to redirect the shuriken to be harmless. It goes without saying that it worked perfectly as now he was staring at a hunched over Kakashi. That wasn't the bad thing though. No, the bad thing was that he was holding his right wrist with his left hand, while his right hand had lightning crackling in his open palm that was facing the ground, creating a circle of lightning around him. The attack was imitating a chirping noise, but with 1,000 bird. So it's going to be like that? Naruto asked while narrowing his eyes. Shrugging to cause his cloak to move off his shoulder blade slightly, Naruto twirled his blade once in a blur of motion in front of him, letting any blood that was on it to fly off. He raised his right arm with the sword and deposited the blade in its sheath with expert precision. With an audible cling the blade disappeared behind his cloak, with only the hilt still being visible after another shrug of his shoulders to put his cloak completely back on. Only when the cloak moved to completely cover his front side did he move, and in a blur of motion hidden by his cloak, he did 10 hand seals and crouched down into the same position as Kakashi was in with the cloak now showing his front completely. But the flash of blue lightning that illuminated everything around him, Naruto's own palm was covered in lightning exactly like Kakashi's was. Said man looked on in astonishment as he saw a very similar, if not the exact same jutsu as he was holding made by someone else. He created this jutsu, no one else should know how to do this unless he taught them himself, and he knew he never taught Naruto this one. It must have been a clan jutsu. Sensing the chakra coming from Naruto's attack, he knew his wouldn't be strong enough to last against it, so he pumped some more chakra into it while molding it in a different way around his hand and inside his body. The effect was easily seen and heard. The lightning turned from a whitish color to a dark blue like Naruto's was, and the thousands of birds chirping stopped and turned into a small humming and hissing like Naruto's was putting out. Watching each other like hawks waiting for their prey to make a move, they stared each other in the eye until the wind decided to pick up at that exact moment in time, and they both shot forward at high blurring speed. To the others watching, they knew this would be the final strike they made and would be the deciding factor of the fight. To see two lightning attacks of such high caliber go against each other was a treat in itself, but to see two S-rank jutsu go against each other was amazing. Meeting in the middle, they both threw their right arms forward as they were dragging them behind them before the two attacks meet head-on, while their respective person yelled out the attack. Urkiri. Lightning Blade, Kakashi yelled over the attack. Aikido Sando Ken. Raging Thunder Blade, Naruto yelled out equally as loud. With a resounding boom they connected, causing a shock wave to go through the clearing, and then the sound of thunder was heard miles away. Sparks and stray lightning flew everywhere in 20 feet of Naruto and Kakashi, who were leaning into their attacks, putting everything they had into them, with the lightning dancing around and in between them. It was a rather amazing sight to see if it wasn't such a deadly attack going on. Setting his foot hard into the ground, Naruto pushed forward with everything he had in the attack, effectively making Kakashi slide back an inch before he pushed just as hard, keeping it at a standstill. Seeing nothing was going to happen but their attacks cancelling each other out, Naruto did something that surprised everyone there. Thrusting his left arm out to the side, electricity quickly formed a familiar palm of lightning. Seeing his tactic, Kakashi did the same thing as Naruto, just did not even a half second later. With two newly created S-rank jutsus ready to use, they both thrust their attacks at each other, trying to win the struggle that until now was a stalemate. With an equally large shockwave as the first one, the two attacks collided head-on, while the sound of thunder could be heard from miles away. Struggling to overpower the other, both Naruto and Kakashi pushed all they could to get the advantage, but after no ground was made for 3 seconds, Naruto redirected his attack slightly. This had an immediate effect on the stalemate as it caused Kakashi to get more ground and allow him to push aside one of Naruto's lightning-covered hands and go for a stab on his body. Naruto was expecting just this as he went with the flow and brought his other lightning-covered hand to block and pushed that one away while dropping down to do a leg sweep. Seeing this, Kakashi jumped over the leg and went for a downward slice. Rolling away while keeping his hands away from his body and the ground, Naruto jumped back and then forward with a thrust. What proceeded from there was a deadly dance of colliding lightning-covered hands and dodging until someone made a mistake and the other could take advantage of it. The rest watched on with bated breath as they all knew that with one mistake they would easily kill each other, as both of their lightning-covered hands could cut through a person with ease. They knew better than trying to interfere and possibly getting in the way also. If they did that, they could cause one of them to be injured or worse by distracting them. Blocking a hit aimed for the shoulder blade, Naruto pushed it to the side, throwing his own at Kakashi. Said man blocked it with expert handling with his own hand and pushed it upwards. Naruto had no option but to follow the movement, leaving both of them with one hand ready to use and the other out of the way for a second. With an upper swing, Naruto hit Kakashi's other hand, and they struggled to overpower the other for just a second, but by that time they could use their other hand again to attack. Bringing his other hand down to his one that was struggling with Kakashi's, Naruto aimed to try it at his arm. Seeing this, Kakashi couldn't get his other hand to intercept it in time, so pulled back while bringing the other one up to Naruto's side. Seeing the other deadly hand coming and having no time to block it easily, he pushed his two hands together and let one diminish slightly, while the other strengthened and pushed the weaker hand away. By being overpowered, it caused it to shoot into Kakashi's incoming hand while restoring the power to it. This caused Naruto to be able to push Kakashi's hand away and leave him defenseless. Taking advantage of that, Naruto thrust his free hand forward right at Kakashi's chest. Tsunade, Jiraiya, and everyone else watching the fight let out a breath when they saw the deadly dance was over, with Naruto holding his lightning-covered hand 8 inches away from Kakashi's chest. Seeing the man doing nothing but standing rigidly, Naruto jumped back and the lightning slowly dissipated around his hands until there was nothing left. Kakashi did the same thing, seeing he lost fair and square, and let his lightning-covered hands dissipate, returning them to normal. The second the two attacks had completely disappeared from Kakashi's hands, he winced, closing his left eye containing the Sharingan and grabbing his right arm that had a 2-inch cut on his bicep while panting heavily. Naruto, on the other hand, just stood there panting moderately while staring at his opponent. Both Kakashi and Naruto had multiple injuries on their respective bodies. Though Kakashi looked slightly worse for wear than Naruto did. They both had multiple bruises and small cuts on them. The only big one on Naruto was the bruising around his ribs. Kakashi, on the other hand, had multiple injuries. His right arm was the most noticeable one, with a cut 2 inches long and an inch deep in his shoulder. He had small cuts all over his body from Naruto's sword making contact with skin. Then there were bruises forming on various points of his body. Overall, Kakashi wouldn't be doing any serious fighting for a day or two. Seeing that everything was finally over, the observers of the match came down to inspect the damage up close. From an above view, the training field looked destroyed with multiple craters, scorch marks, and weapons embedded around the place. Just as they were landing on the ground from their positions in the trees, a dozen Anbu dropped into the field surrounding Kakashi and Naruto in a circle. The leader of the squadron quickly assessed the field and saw all the damage and figured it was caused by the two they were surrounding. Just when he was about to turn his eyes back to the two of them, he saw Tsunade and multiple other Jounin and Chunin drop from a nearby tree and the Hokage quickly walking up to him. "What's the meaning of this, Nico?" Tsunade asked dangerously. Said Anbu captain was smart enough to know when their Hokage was angry and quickly explained before she got the wrong impression. "We came to investigate the two bangs of thunder we heard, Hokage-sama." The Anbu replied hurriedly while standing straighter. Tsunade eyed them all and then nodded in understanding. "Very well, Nico. Stand down." The two sounds you most likely heard were Haddock and Uzumaki fighting. Just as Nico was about to retort to her commander, one of her subordinates spoke up. "The demon did that to Kakashi?" he asked with obvious venom in his voice. Tsunade whirled on the said person and glared right into his mask that she knew hid a slightly scared face. "What did you say, Shark?" she questioned threateningly. The said Anbu with the code name Shark turned his head away from her and looked at Naruto that was standing to the side with his hands crossed over his chest watching calmly while the rest of the Anbu still surrounding him and Kakashi. "The Kyuubi brat attacked Kakashi, Tsunade-sama." He stated more as a fact than a question while looking directly at Naruto's emotionless face. Tsunade bristled at what she heard. The other Jounin in the area could easily see her getting ready to send this newbie Anbu on a one-way trip to the hospital, while the former Genin watched on in slight confusion on why he was calling Naruto all these things. Just as Tsunade was about to yell at the fool, her eyes widened with everyone else's in the clearing at what they just saw. Not even 2 seconds before, just after the Anbu code named Shark finished talking, Naruto disappeared from his spot with a burst of speed and reappeared behind the startled Anbu, who insulted him while simultaneously removing his sword from its hilt on his back and brought it about in a horizontal swing. A second later he flicked his wrist, cleaning the blood off the sword to give it a clean silver shine and re-sheathed his sword in one swift fluent movement. The only ones to even catch the movement were those of Jounin level or above. The rest just saw Naruto appear behind the Anbu re-sheathing his sword as the body in front of him slowly tilted forward. When the body hit the ground, the head rolled silently away as if it was never even attached to begin with. Everyone tensed, but one command from their Hokage to stand down stopped them in their tracks. "Nico, take your squad and leave. There's no reason for you to be here," Tsunade stated calmly after seeing Naruto just behead someone. "And the dead body, ma'am?" she asked, gesturing to her former comrade. Tsunade looked at the dead man coldly. "Take his body to the infirmary and inform his family of his death. He broke the law and paid the price. Go." "Hi, Hokage-sama." With that, the Anbu in the area disappeared in moments. Once they were all gone, Tsunade turned to Naruto and looked at him with a blank face. Seeing her expression and knowing what she wanted, he explained himself. "Like you said, Hokage-sama, he broke the law and I was just fulfilling the punishment for said crime," he stated in a monotone voice while his face was emotionless and blank. "Wait just a second. You just killed a guy right in front of us, one of our own Konoha ninja, and you say it's okay? What the hell kind of law is that?" Kiba yelled out, looking for answers but only receiving silence in return. The other former Genin were wondering the same thing. Just when he was about to demand answers, Naruto spoke up. "If you don't know the law in Izuka, then it is none of your concern." He spoke without even looking at him but staring down Tsunade. Neither of them seemed like they would back down anytime soon. "What the hell does that mean, dope?" he yelled angrily. "Enough, Kiba. Even though Naruto should have left that for me to handle, he is right, what he did was well within his rights to do." Seeing Kiba about to protest again, she spoke up again, stopping him. "He's also right about the fact if you don't know the law, then there's no reason for you to concern yourself with it. It's an S-class secret and it will stay that way until I or Naruto says otherwise." "What do you?" Kiba's question was cut off by Shino grabbing his shoulder and shaking his head in the negative to indicate to drop it, grumbling he did so. "Well," Tsunade said quietly, bringing everyone's attention back to her. "Now that the fight's over and it's just us again, we should probably get you two healed," she stated, looking at both Naruto and Kakashi and then turning to her apprentice that's been surprisingly quiet the whole time. "Sakura, you go look after Naruto's injuries and I'll take care of Kakashi, okay?" she asked her apprentice, giving her a look that clearly said not to argue. Seeing the look, she nodded. "Hi, Tsunade Shishu. Master." But that parting word, she slowly walked over to Naruto and stopped in front of him. He only continued to stare her down as she approached slowly and saw the look she was giving him as if she was scared of him. She noticed right away that she was way shorter than he was. That was definitely different for her. As she used to have to look down at him, but now she had to look up a good 5 inches to make eye contact. Slowly going through hand seals, Sakura held her hands up a few seconds later, and a soft green glow encompassed them with a soft humming sound. Seeing her healing chakra was working perfectly well, she brought her hands to Naruto's ribs, but was stopped short by a hand grabbing her wrists. She looked up into his face to see him looking down at her with a blank face. That look sent a shiver down her spine, and she gave him a questioning look. "I'm just going to heal your bruised ribs, Naruto," she stated quietly. Naruto just continued to look at her with that blank face. By that time they had attracted everyone's attention to themselves, and Sakura was starting to get nervous, and it showed by the sweat sliding down her face. Finally Naruto pushed her glowing green hands down away from his body and let go of her wrists. "I'll be fine, Haruno," he stated in a monotone and turned on the spot and walked silently over to a different area, well aware that everyone was following his every move and action. Ignoring them, he leaned against a tree and closed his eyes, shutting out everything around him, or so it seemed to the others. Jiraiya watched on sadly, as did Tsunade, now that she knew why he acted the way he did. The night before, Jiraiya told her that Ikari used to heal his wounds when he got hurt. She was by no means as good as Sakura herself, but she knew the basics about medical chakra and how to heal. Shaking her head sadly, she turned back to see Kakashi frowning and looking at Naruto in wonder while she healed him up. She knew that even without getting healed by Sakura, that Naruto would be as good as new in a few hours, if not a day at most. 10 minutes later she was done with healing Kakashi and turned her attention to the others around her. Jiraiya was leaning beside Naruto a few feet away from him. The Jounin were talking with each other in a small group with Neji left out. He was with the other former Genin talking with them. They seemed frustrated and she caught tidbits of their conversation to know that they had tried to talk to Naruto, but he would only give short answers and nothing more. And when they asked something he didn't want to talk about, he downright ignored them. By the looks of things, only Neji, Shino, and Lee were able to get him to answer some questions, and even those were short and to the point, but after a while he just stopped answering. She frowned seeing him acting like this, but she knew there was very little she could do to help him get over what has happened in his short life. She was just happy he wasn't worse than he is though. With all the crap that's gone wrong in his life, I'm surprised he's still sane, let alone somewhat normal. She thought sadly while looking at him with a faraway look. Shaking her head, she came back to the present and saw that everyone was in their own conversations. She noticed that Kakashi was standing over by the other Jounin, still looking at Naruto with a calculating eye every now and then. Looking at Naruto, she slowly brought her thoughts fully to the present and approached him. When she started moving, she absently noticed everyone in the clearing following her moves like they did Naruto's earlier, but just like him, she ignored them all. Standing in front of him, she cleared her throat, causing Naruto to open his eyes and lock eyes with her before pushing off the tree and standing 5 feet in front of her at attention. "Hi Hokage-sama?" he asked in that annoyingly so monotone voice he's developed. "Hey, Haddock, come here," Tsunade commanded, not breaking the eye contact she had with Naruto. Said gentlemen were at her side in moments awaiting her orders. "As you know, I came up with this test to assess Uzumaki ration Naruto on his skill level and what rank he should be bestowed. After fighting and seeing his skills in battle, what is your opinion on him?" Here she turned her head to Kakashi. Seeing she wanted him to go first, he did just that. "Well, you've definitely grown stronger over the past 2.5 years, Naruto," he stated. Looking at Naruto and getting no response, he continued. "I only have one question before I can fully answer you, Hokage-sama." Seeing her nod in acceptance, he turned in Naruto's direction and stared straight at him. "That final attack you did, what was it exactly?" "It looked like a copy of my Raikiri." Naruto looked at him for a few seconds before answering. "It may be hard for you to understand, Haddock, but that attack was created even before you were born. If anything, you made a copy of it, not the other way around. It's called Jaquito Sandoken. Raging Thunder Blade. As you might have noticed, they are not the same attacks, just the same power. Mine created a loud shock wave that sounded like thunder. Mine is also different as you don't need the Sharingan to use it." Seeing he wouldn't continue, Kakashi pushed. "Can you tell me why you don't need the Sharingan?" "My Raikiri creates a vacuum effect making a person have tunnel vision, so it's required to have the Sharingan. My Jaquito Sandoken has no such limitations. The way the electricity flows and is formed allows me to use it as I see fit without affecting any of my abilities," Naruto told him matter-of-factly. Narrowing his eyes, he nodded in understanding. "I see. Well, I must say that everything you showed in our fight was easily Jounin level. I think you deserve the rank. You definitely have the mindset to be a Jounin also, so no problems there. Overall, I'd say promote him, Hokage-sama." Nodding in Kakashi's direction, Tsunade turned to Hayate. "And your opinion on his sword skills, Hayate?" she questioned, already knowing his answer, as did everyone else in the clearing. Stepping forward, he gave her a slight bow of the head in acknowledgement. "His skills with the sword are easily beyond my own. I noticed throughout the fight when you were using your sword that you used multiple styles, is this true? He directed the question at Naruto. Said man nodded his head in the affirmative but didn't bother to elaborate any. Seeing this, he continued. As I thought. I saw at least 4 different styles combined into one to make what he has. Overall, I highly doubt you've used even close to your most deadly attacks with the sword, have you, Naruto? Again, all he got was silence, but this time he was stared down by said man intently, like he was searching on how much he knew. Overall, Hokage-sama, I'd say if he ever went full out with a sword, he could possibly be as good as the 7 swordsmen of the mist. The others looked at him like he was crazy, but seeing his serious look, they knew he wasn't kidding about what he said on Naruto's sword skills. Turning to the one they were talking about, they saw him with an emotionless mask like before. Nodding in thanks, Tsunade turned her full attention back to Naruto. I can safely say that your skills are on Jounin level, if not slightly higher than that. You also have the right mindset to be a Jounin. You have no problem following the rules, taking the necessary actions when needed, and knowing how to handle different situations correctly. With all this in mind, as Hokage of this village, I bestow upon you the rank of Jounin. Taking out a scroll from her pockets, she opened it up some and pushed some chakra into it to have a Jounin flank jacket pop out in a cloud of smoke. Putting the scroll away, she lifted the vest in front of him. Congratulations on your new rank, Uzumaki Ration Naruto. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Naruto's monotone voice replied while taking the vest from her outstretched hands and sealing it inside one of his own scrolls. If one were to listen closely, they would have heard the slight happy tone in his voice, but most of them didn't catch it. Dejected at not getting a bigger response out of him, she shook her head to clear it of thought before addressing him again. Come by my office tomorrow afternoon so I can explain your full responsibilities then, until then you're free to go. She dismissed with a happy smile in his direction. Alright Naruto-kun, you made Jounin, your flames of youth burn most brightly, I'll have to increase my own training twofold to catch up with you. Lee joyously shouted while clasping Naruto on the back. You said it, Lee, who would have thought that the dead last would become so strong. Kiba grinned in Naruto's direction while walking up to him. Why you did really well in Naruto-kun. Hinata congratulated him shyly. It seems you've gotten a lot stronger since the last time we fought Naruto. Neji said stoically. Within the next couple of minutes, all the former genin and even the Jounin complimented Naruto on his skills and welcomed him back into the village happily. Through this all, Naruto remained silent while the others commented on his skills and talked amongst themselves, even though he didn't answer any of them back. Finally, they noticed he wasn't answering and an awkward silence grew amongst them. Stepping forward slightly while keeping her head down and twiddling with her thumbs, Hinata breathed in slightly and looked up into Naruto's eyes. Would you like to go get some dinner with me and the others? She asked nervously. The others looked between the two of them with conflicting emotions. They all knew that Hinata had a crush on Naruto, that she's had one on him for a long time, since they were in the academy actually, and for her to ask him now was a big step for her. But they also all knew that Naruto was married at one point when he was away from the village for the last 2.5 years. They didn't know the full details, but they knew that she had been killed and that Naruto had obviously loved her very much. Jiraiya and Tsunade were the only ones that knew the full story, and they both winced when they heard the question. They knew talking about Naruto's wife was a very sore subject for him. Jiraiya confirmed this to Tsunade a lot to make the point clear to her. They knew that Naruto wouldn't react well to her question, they just hoped he didn't hurt her too much. Looking at Hinata straight in the eye, he answered with some slight force in his voice. No. Hinata looked down at the ground while stuttering out a reply. Well that's okay then Naruto-kun. Kiba narrowed his eyes at Naruto while stomping up to him, so their faces were only inches apart. You don't have to be such an ass to her, you know, she was only asking if you wanted to go out to eat with us and catch up. Kiba practically growled out in Naruto's face. Why you don't have to defend me Kiba. Hinata mumbled out shyly. Naruto just stared straight into Kiba's eyes, not the least bit intimidated by his aggression. That's not why I said no Inizuka. Kiba growled at the use of his last name. Oh then do tell, and why don't you use my first name Naruto? Naruto calmly took a few steps back to get some distance between them and responded in kind. I don't use your first name because I don't want to. As for the reason I said no to Hinata's question is simple. I have no interest in spending time with her whatsoever. He stated with a monotone voice void of emotions. Hinata's head lowered even more, while the others in the clearing narrowed their eyes in Naruto's direction, seeing him speak those hurtful words to Hinata. Kiba started but was interrupted. I know all about her crush on me. That statement had Hinata's head snapping up in his direction and a few heads to turn to look at him with wonder. I'm no fool when it comes to love. I fell in love with the most beautiful woman in the world, which I had planned on spending the rest of my life with. Naruto's soft voice traveled to each of their ears and caught their attention. Sadly, all happy things in my life must come to an end, and she was killed in front of my eyes. I want nothing to do with another woman for the rest of my life. So her feelings for me are pointless as they will never be returned. The sooner she realizes this, the happier she'll be. Naruto finished coldly while turning around and walking away silently. The others could only watch his retreating back with different emotions. Some were angry at him for the way he shot down Hinata, but at the same time they knew he was suffering even more than she could ever feel on the inside. He may not show it, but they could easily tell that he missed his wife greatly and still felt pain whenever she was mentioned. Letting him leave, they turned to Hinata to see her crying with Kurenai soothing her distraught former student. Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Tsunade each watched Naruto's retreating form with different thought on their minds. They couldn't imagine going through all he's gone through and still be sane after it all. They each caught what Naruto said, sadly all happy things in my life must come to an end. To know that after everything he has gone through, all of that, and probably even more than they knew about, all he's ever wanted deep down was a family to love. And when he finally gets it, it's torn away from him. They just couldn't imagine how that felt and how much that must have hurt him. Sadly watching his form completely disappear, they turned to the others around them to see them retreating back to the village, each going their separate ways. Nodding to the others, they too went back to Konoha, all having similar thought that surrounded the new Naruto. The end. The author has ended this story here. One like for the author for this amazing story.